We will now have the roll call of our patriots and their biographies. I ask now compatriot and past president Edward Spanis to briefly tell us about our 5 patriots we are honoring today. These patriots are listed on page 2 of your program. And I have to tell you, I want a special shout out to past president Ed Spanis, who was kind of the point man for all this, and is historically and it continues to be it, and his wife Nancy, who is also a former regent with the DAR, and she's here today with a wreath. So could I have a big hand of applause for Nancy and Ed?
Okay, thank you, Dave. Actually, I'm past president of the Sergeant Lawrence Everhart chapter in Frederick, Maryland. Just so I'm not confused with other presidents. We have many other presidents and past presidents here of chapters. And my wife also is not the regent of Catoctin chapter, but she is an active member of the DAR. Today, this is the 3rd time that we have had a 5 Patriot grave marking in the cemetery. And as has been mentioned, we are looking forward to the installation of a Commonwealth of Virginia Revolutionary War Patriots monument, which was supposed to be here by today. Due to problems with the stonecutter, it wasn't here for today. Now we're told that it will be here probably by the end of the month. And so that will be the 33 Patriots in the cemetery that we know of in the cemetery. And that will be placed at the top of the hill there by the road where it can be seen. Now, the 5 Patriots that we honor today, some of them we know a lot more about than others. The ones, not surprisingly, that we know the least about names are Schmidt or Smith. One, in fact, is a John Smith or Johanna Schmidt. And that, just like John Smith today is sort of, the synonym for the most common name around, Johann Schmidt was a very common name. And you go back to our parent church in Frederick, and there's a lot of Schmidts. So it has been harder to trace them, but we do know for a fact that they did support the revolution by paying the supply tax. Let me say a little bit about that. You may think, well, paying a tax was such a big deal about that. In those days, it was a big deal. It was not automatic. The county had no listing of people who lived here. They had no property records. They had some property records, but up here you had 2 major landlords, Fairfax and Tankerville. So you didn't have property records. You didn't have a census. And frankly, the county didn't know who lived up here, and for the most part, they didn't care. Because these were Germans who they looked down upon, who came here from Pennsylvania through Maryland. And they were sort of living off in the woods someplace. This was the frontier at the time. And the only time that they got counted at all was the tithe which was taken by the Anglican Church. And as you might imagine, the people here weren't too anxious to pay that for support of a different church. So many of them just avoided it. And in fact, they didn't come around and collect at that point. During the time of the Revolution, up until 1787, you had to go pay at the county courthouse your taxes. So you had to go out of your way to pay, and so many people didn't pay the supply tax. Some didn't pay it for religious reasons or philosophical reasons, that they were opposed to the war. Some people were fined because they didn't pay it. But all the patriots who we acknowledge here were those who did pay it, and we took the tax records and compared them to the burial records of the church. And that's how we came up with the number. But it had to be sure that they were the right people. So the 2 of them, Jacob Smith and John Schmidt, as I say, we know the least about. Now, the 3rd one I'll mention is Frederick Boger. We did do in a previous grave marking his brother Michael Boger. We do know about him, Frederick. He was born in 1752 in Baden-Württemberg in what's today's Germany. In fact, going through our 33 patriots here, the majority of them came from either Baden or Württemberg. what those states were. That was part of the Elector Palatine, so they were all called Palatines. But that area in southwest Germany was the most common. His grandfather, Fredericks, was the immigrant who came here in 1732. He is an older brother of Michael Boger, who we honored a couple of years ago, and their sister, incidentally, married a Fry, and they were the great-grandparents of the Wright brothers. So you go down around Hillsborough, you'll see markers for the Wright brothers. Well, their grandparents and great-grandparents are buried here in the old cemetery. The fourth one I'll mention is Christian Roos. Let me just get to the right page here. Here we go. I can't even complain about the wind today because there isn't any, is there? Christian Roos was born in Germany, or present-day Germany. He was naturalized at the Lutheran Church in Frederick. Now, naturalization was a province of the churches in those days, and it would normally be through the Anglican Church, which was the established church in both Maryland and Virginia. But the Lutheran Church, since about half of what was then Frederick County were German settlers, was permitted to naturalize. So in 1765, he was naturalized at that church, and the listing in the naturalization records lists Pastor Schwerdtfeger, the same one that Mike mentioned, Pastor Schwerdtfeger. They got a little bit closer to the English name of it by calling him Schwerdtfeger. So to be naturalized, you had to be a resident for 7 years and have taken communion in one of the churches, one of the recognized churches. So he was naturalized in 1765. 4 years later, he first appeared on the tithable list in Loudoun County, and was here many years before he finally shows up in a lease officially in 1793, and is able to buy property finally in around 1803, about 10 years later. The property that he owned is the property that's now the Lovettsville Community Park, which is back sort of this way over here. As you're driving out of town toward Waterford on Milltown Road, that park, that was his property. The final one I'll mention is, is John Andrew Roller. This is an interesting family. He was also, I just realized last night looking through my notes, he was naturalized the same day as Christian Roos was at Evangelical Lutheran Church in Frederick by Pastor Schwerdtfeger. There were about 20 German people from Germany who were naturalized on that day. He was here in Loudoun County. He appears in 1767, 2 years after that, on the tithable list. Now his family, he had two sons, John Andrew Roller, who served in the Continental Line, the 3rd Virginia Regiment. So two sons in the Continental Army. Of his daughters, one daughter, Rosina, married a Hessian soldier, Hessian defector, basically, named Bornhaus. The second daughter, and the second daughter, Catherine, married George Abel. These were both from the Air Prince Hessian Regiment from Kassel. And the third daughter married someone who was purported, maybe it may or may not have been a Hessian, whose name was Slates. So you had two brothers who were Continental soldiers. 3 of the daughters married Hessians. Now that might be a little surprising, but in fact the Hessians, these were Hessians who had been at the barracks in Frederick, who decided that they didn't necessarily defect, but at the end of the war they decided to stay here, became assimilated into the communities and upstanding citizens. And the fact that this one family had both Continental soldiers and Hessians, I think, indicates what happened after the war. And this was not accidental. There was a great effort by the Continental Congress and George Washington to induce the Hessian soldiers to stay here and to defect, to see how Germans lived here in improvement to the contrast to how they lived in Europe. So that's an interesting family. And find out more about them on the Patriot record system on the SAR website, but that's the short version. Back to you, Dave.
Thank you very much, Ed.